Hey everyone, I just updated my first modern challenge of the year, so I figured today was a good time to give you a quick sideboard guide for Omnath Yorion, as well as quick matchup guides as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna get into it real quick. No fancy animations or graph or anything, but just go matchup by matchup, tell you what I would bring in, what I would bring out, and maybe how I feel about the matchup. So yeah, maybe feel free to take notes if you want a sideboard guide for yourself. But yeah, so first matchup, I'll just start with Rhinos. So against Rhinos, I would bring in 2 Veil. I have my notes. So +2 Veil, +3 Explosives, +1 Flusterstorm, +1 Verdict. And I would board out 4 bolts, 2 spreading seas, and 1 solitude. Take every sideboard with a grain of salt. Bolt, for instance, not great against them, but I think they play Jace sometimes. I don't know if it's stuck or not, but keep in mind that Bolt can be okay against Jace. Bolt plus minus strength can kill a Rhino. Bolt can kill a Subtlety or a Fury. So some bolts might be okay. It's not a super exact science. Yeah, I think that matchups is tough. I think that if you don't have a bunch of sideboard cards against them, you're not favored. That's why I have so many explosives, and the Flusterstorm doesn't hurt as doesn't hurt either. Before I keep going, I guess I'll go over the list real quick because you might know that some people play Ragavan, some people don't play Ragavan. There's lists with Ephemerate and Witness. There's lists with Risen Reef. There's just a bunch of different variants. There's lists that play Alademery's Call, which I think is quite good, mostly because it just gives you more Omnath. But long story short, I think honestly all these lists are fine. I like Ragavan. I've had a lot of success with that deck. I've been playing it since beginning of the year, and while it's the first time I top 8 a challenge, I've been playing pretty poorly, and most of my losses are just mistakes. And I've been going consistently like 5-3, 4-3, and punting multiple matches. So even though my results have not been great, I think the deck's really strong. And I've just been sticking to Ragavan plus Memory Deluge, but I think the shell's really good, and you can go either way, especially if you're trying to save the money on Ragavan. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's move on. Blue-White Hammer next. I chose 10 decks, kind of the 10 most played decks. Maybe I forgot one, but it should give you a good idea. Blue-White Hammer, I would bring in 3 Engineer's Explosives, 1 Supreme Verdict, 2 Boseiju, and 2 Force of Vigor. And I would board out 4 Counterspell, 2 Deluge, and 2 Teferi maybe. Unclear what the last cuts should be. I'm not 100% sure Boseiju is super great against them. So maybe try and figure that out. And yeah, that matchup's been really tough. I lost to it today. I lost to it last weekend. I've been struggling against Hammer Time overall. But yeah, explosives used to be better against them. Now that they don't have Lurus, explosives actually a little worse. Their curve is more spread out. They play Teferi Time Raveler. And yeah, this is a tough matchup. Pure Steel Paladin is a pain. Try to keep that card in mind. And obviously Sentinel is also annoying when they have it on turn 1, and that's why I like Ragavan. You might think, oh, they have Esper Sentinel, they have Stoneforge Mystic, they have Memnite, and Ragavan's not good, but while it's not amazing, it can definitely run away with the game on the play, and even on the draw, just having a 1 mana spell you can cast into Sentinel is kind of a big deal, even if it just trades was a Sentinel, a Memnite, or even a Stoneforge Mystic, it might be worth it. You're a little light on early plays. So yeah, that's the main matchup. Why I have 2 Force of Vigors in my sideboard. I feel like that card's a little narrow. It's pretty good against Amulet Titan as well, but trying to respect the Hammer Time matchup. To give you an idea, right now, if I could play more cards in my sideboard, you know, if magically I could have 18 sideboard cards, My extra cards would probably be a second endurance, the Force Boseiju in the sideboard, and maybe maybe a second Flusterstorm, maybe a second Verdict. But yeah, I guess Force Boseiju and second endurance are probably pretty high on the list. All right, next, Black Green Yagmoth. I would bring in Flusterstorm, couple Veils, as well as Endurance and Verdict. Endurance is not super great, but I think it's serviceable. You might be able to break their loop if you're desperate, and just the blocker could be good too. They like to just beat down with their creatures. I think this is a pretty decent matchup. I think you're probably slightly favored. So yeah, I would bring in these cards and I would board out 4 Ragavan and I guess 1 Teferi. I'm not sure what the last card should be, but Ragavan's pretty awful against them. I mean, maybe on the play you can hope to get lucky, but obviously they have Young Wolf, which even if you kill, it comes back unless you have exactly ending. So I wouldn't blame anyone for keeping maybe 1 or 2 Ragavan on the plays. There's a bunch of matchups where Ragavan is mediocre and I'll still leave 1 or 2 just because, how bad can it be? Even when you play Ragavan and they minus a Ren on it, you still bought yourself a little time. It means they couldn't bring back a land. Maybe you have a bolt to finish it off, etc. So even if you're going to be kind of down a card, it might be tempo-wise, it might be good for you. All right, next, Burn. Burn's pretty tough matchup. Problem with Burn is you can't really afford sideboard cards against them because they're usually pretty narrow. Something like Weather the Storm, I'm a big fan, but super narrow. If you're playing Alad Emery Skull, you can play Knight of Autumn, but even that's kind of clunky, not super amazing. You still take the 2 damage against Eidolon and stuff, so it's a fine card, especially if you have a Ephemerate, but kind of whatever. Solitude's one of your best card there. Obviously, the goal is try to live to an Omnath and just trigger Omnath a couple times, and then you should easily win. So against Burn, I would bring in Flusterstorm, I would bring in 2 Boseiju, I would bring in 1 Force of Vigor, I would bring in 1 Endurance, and maybe the Verdict, especially on the play. And then I would board out 4 Icefang Coddle and 2 Memory Deluge. I think Icefang's really poor against them. It doesn't trade against anything, takes damage from Eidolon. Sure, it draws a card, but it's pretty mediocre. And Deluge, I'm guessing Deluge is a little too slow. The reason I like Boseiju against them is that it's pain-free land, which is a pretty big deal, and it also deals with Eidolon, so I think it's decent there. But I could see keeping in a Icefang or 2, or maybe a Deluge or 2. That's also fine, but yeah, these cards are not very good. All right. Yeah, Burn tough matchup. I mean, as I said, it's tough to have dedicated sideboard cards because you need cards that are more versatile. But if your metagame is full of Burn, maybe just play a couple of Weather the Storms and trim on other cards for decks you expect less. All right, next matchup, we've got Amulet Titan. Amulet. Against Amulet, I would bring in 2 Boseiju, 2 Force of Vigor, 1 Verdict, and 1 Engineered Explosives, I guess. Not 100% on that one. And I would board out 4 Ragavan and 2 Fury. Fury kills Dryad, but that's about it. Ragavan is kind of a pipe dream. They have Grazer, they have Dryad, and even if you do hit, you're not going to get anything relevant. Their cards are just all really bad. It's just random stuff that doesn't really help you. So obviously the treasure is nice, but yeah, I don't think you should keep in Ragavan. Bolt is not amazing against them. Maybe you should board out Bolt too, but Bolt finishes up Dryad. Bolt plus Ren finishes up Dryad. It kills Azusa. Sometimes just killing a Saga token is what you need, just to buy some time, and obviously double Bolt kills the Titan, so that might be able to come up. So yeah, Bolt might not be the best. Maybe if you want to keep in a Fury, that's fine. If you want to try and get lucky and keep Ragavan on the play, maybe you can keep 1 or 2. Usually people don't play Karn anymore in Amulet, But obviously, if they have Karn in their deck, Bolt also goes up in value there. And I think that matchup is actually decent ever since they printed Boseiju. Boseju's really strong against specifically the bounce lands. And yeah, if you expect a lot of Amulet, maybe have the Force Boseiju in the sideboard. There's also a lot of lists that play just 2 Boseiju in the main. I found the mana to be a bit rough. I like I'm playing kind of a pretty straightforward mana base. Just the 5 basics, 2 islands, 1 forest, 1 Boseiju. There used to be 2 forests before Boseiju, but now I think 1 is enough. And I play 1 Sokenzan, which has been quite good for me, but I think it might be worse than a fetch land. So it maybe just go up to 16 fetch lands and play not play the Sokenzan. All right, next matchup, Murktide. I think blue-red Murktide is a slightly favorable matchup, but that's one of the reasons why I really like Ice Fang. I like 4 Ice Fang, 4 Solitude against them, and that helps a decent bit. I would bring in 2 Veil of Summer, 1 Endurance, 1 Flusterstorm, and I would board out 2 Furies and 2 Spreading Seas. Fury and Spreading Sea kind of helps you a bit against can be kind of good against Blood Moon sometimes. That's definitely a card you should keep in mind. And yeah, it's kind of a close matchup. I think you're slightly favored. I've been doing well today in the challenge. I beat 2 good players playing Murktide. Even their draw were not like amazing, but still I think the matchup is fine. Yeah, try not sequence. Try and keep iteration in mind when you're sequencing. Don't be scared to play Drago a bit if they're not doing much, and if you're making your land drops and stuff. And because the typical example is they say go with 2 mana up, and you have a counter spell and a Renin 6, and you just jam Renin 6, they counter, they untap, they play iteration, and they kind of out-tempoed you. And you can just fight that by saying go. You know, there's no rush if they don't have a creature in play. And yeah. Your best draw, obviously, on the play, easy way to win is to have Ragavan into Renin 6. That's true in a lot of matchups, and I think that's one of the reasons why this deck is so good, because yeah, and why Ragavan is good in the deck. I'm not saying Ragavan's way better than the other versions, but that's the main reason. You get these free wins. Obviously, there's a little more variance to it, though. Anyways, next for the mirror match. So for the mirror match, if I'm on the play, I think I would just cut 2 Spreading Seas and bring in 2 Veil of Summer. But if I'm on the draw, I would bring in 2 Veil, 2 Relic, and maybe 1 Endurance. And I would cut 2 Spreading Seas and 2 or 3 Ragavans. So the reasons I want Ragavan on the play is what I just mentioned. If you go Ragavan, they have to deal with it, and then you follow up with Renin 6, and you're just super far ahead. And obviously, if you have Ragavan and they don't have a removal, then you can run away with the game. Whereas on the draw, they can just ping it with Ren. They have more removal. They can block it with Ice Fang. It gets much worse. And kind of same with Relic. One of the best cards in the mirror and in general is Renin 6. And if you're on the draw and they play turn 2 Renin 6, you can have Ending, but that's about it. Whereas if you go turn 1 Relic, hopefully you can keep them in check. Unless they have, they can still go double fetch land, and then you can only remove 1 and they get to get 1 back. But maybe down the line, it would, it will slow down Renin 6 and whatnot, maybe even get a Deluge, but not amazing, but I think it kind of decent to bring them in the mirror, especially because Ragavan on the draw kind of not great. Next, a deck that I've been doing well against. I actually won a crazy game the other day where they Sundering Titan all my lands, and I came back. That's kind of cool. It's Mono Green Tron. Against Green Tron, I would bring in 2 Boseiju and 2 Force of Vigor, and I would board out 2 Furies and 2 Solitudes. I'm not 100% sure about Force of Vigor versus Solitude, but Oblivion Stone's kind of an annoying card, and maybe if you're on the draw, it might be worth it to 2-for-1 yourself on a map, especially since Tron mulligans really aggressively. If they, go down to 6 or 5, it might not be that big of a deal if you 2-for-1 yourself to get rid of a map. That's another matchup where you wish you had forced Boseiju, but yeah, ever since Boseiju got added, I felt that matchup was decent for color Omnath. And then last but not least, I guess. Yeah, there was only 9 decks. Anyways, against Living End. Living End that's been pretty popular, pretty solid deck. It was kind of one of my favorite decks in Modern, or my most played deck for a while, but I felt like things got really hostile. Some people still think it's a really good deck, and I think it's good. It also keeps doing well. But last few times I've played Living End, I've kind of struggled. I think the matchup is really close. It's a bit like Rhinos, tough matchup, and if you don't respect it, if you don't have the hate, you're gonna be behind. So that's why I have some relics, some endurance, Philosopher's Storm, etc. So against Living End, I would bring in 2 Veil of Summer. You want them for grief and for some negation. They also have dispute after sideboard sometimes. Obviously, bring in 2 Relic of Progenitus, 1 endurance, 1 Philosopher's Storm, and 1 Verdict. Verdict is nice against them, but it does suffer from the fact that if they draw grief, they grief you, they take your counterspell or whatnot, and then when they're Living End, they get grief back, and then now they can take Verdict because Verdict's just super reactive, but still better than some of the cards you're going to board out. And I would board out 4 Prismatic Ending. They don't do much. I mean, maybe you can kill a Sphinx for 4 mana, not very exciting. And then I'm not sure if you should board out a bunch of bolts, or if you should keep in some bolts and board out Spreading Seas. Bolt can be nice to kill your own Ice Fang in response to Living End, and they also pitch to Fury, whereas Spreading Seas just always cantrips, and the mana in Living End is not perfect, so you can maybe mana screw them for a few turns with Spreading Seas. So that one's kind of close. But yeah, that's my sideboard guide for 9 matchups. It was kind of lazy quote unquote format because I just basically read through my notes, no graphs, no nothing. But hopefully you can take some notes. Let me know what you think. If that was watchable and okay, or if I need to put in more efforts for these guys. Obviously for me it's a bit easier, and also lets me like maybe make guides faster rather than spend hours or days trying to prepare them and stuff. But let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if maybe there's a specific matchup you want, or if you have follow-up questions. I'll go through the comments. So let me know. You can also check out just my stream in general. That's the best way. If you ever have questions for me, it's the easiest and best way. You come while I'm streaming, twitch.tv/yellowhat. I'll put the link in the description, and I'm just here for that. I'm just hanging out, playing some Magic, and answering questions if you have any. What else? Yeah, I think that's about it. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.